I've mentioned it quite a few times before, but it's worth noting once again that I'm not exactly the bravest when it comes to horror. Surprisingly though, I do keep finding myself playing them, which has led some of you to question my fear threshold. Well, it's probably not going to help my case today, but I'm diving into another one. This game is Cannibal Abduction, and this is brought to us by Puppet Combo. They are known for their retro-styled horror titles, and I must confess I do have a soft spot for their releases. So my big question today, can this game live up to their track record of great releases? And that is what I'm here to find out. My name's Alex, this is SwitchCorner, and if you enjoy the video, subscribe, it helps out the channel a huge amount. Cannibal Abduction follows Henry, a young man who has borrowed his father's car for a weekend getaway. Now, as we embark on this journey, our car encounters some unexpected issues, leaving us stranded in the middle of nowhere. Now, thankfully, an older gentleman comes to our rescue, offering to tow us to his farm, as he just happens to be a mechanic. In return, he asks for our assistance in fixing a wardrobe in his house, which, yes, sounds a little random, but it was actually revealed that Henry's family has expertise in carpentry. So as we get to work on the wardrobe and nightfall is coming, it becomes apparent that we are trapped inside, and it's revealed that this family has sinister intentions. That is, we are to become dinner. Now, I thought the story was good fun. It's a straightforward yet classic tale often seen in the genre, and the house is also filled with various notes that do add to the family's history. There's also then two different endings to uncover. Now, I do want to point out then as well, while Cannibal Abduction is the main attraction of this release, it also includes the developer's first game, that was The Night of the Scissors. The storyline in this one is a bit more straightforward, but we find ourselves breaking into an abandoned post office to pilfer whatever we can lay our hands on. However, things take a dark turn when we realise we are trapped inside with a killer known as the Snipper. This is a character armed with a pair of scissors and a sinister agenda to eliminate us. This character definitely never got the message about running with scissors being dangerous. Cannibal Abduction, much like other Puppet Combo releases, takes a nostalgic leap back to the era of PS1 horror games, reminiscent of titles like Resident Evil from that time. Now, what does this mean? Expect tank controls and fixed angular cameras that do pan and tilt as you move. These are referred to as cinematic within the game. Now, for those who grew up in that era, this control scheme will feel familiar, but if you're hoping for a more modern control setup, you will not find it here. So to be clear, pressing up moves you forward, left and right rotate the character in place, and down makes you step backwards. It is intentionally clunky and slow, but it's balanced by the fact that the killer pursuing us is also slow. Now, my recommendation here, play with the D-pad. Tank controls just don't transition while at the joystick. In addition to these movement controls, we also have a flashlight that we can switch on and off, the ability to sprint, and the option to interact with various items. Now, one of the more challenging aspects of this game is going to be inventory management. You are limited to carrying only 5 items at a time, with everything else needing to be stored in a toolbox, which is located in the room where you did begin. I found myself frequently swapping items in and out because some were essential for progression, like think a key to unlock cabinets, while others were going to be geared towards survival, such as bandages. Regarding gameplay then, Cannibal Abduction can be summarized as an exploration-focused journey where you'll need to solve puzzles to escape. And yes, this sounds easy, but you do need to factor in you are being stalked by a family member who has a meat cleaver in hand, and they can show up at any time. It also has 2 difficulty options, which I'm sure impacts the frequency you encounter them, and this will also no doubt impact how many hits you can take before death. On the normal difficulty, 3 slashes seem to be the average to take me down. On this note, one aspect that might catch many players off guard is the limited save system. You can't save the game at any time. Instead, saves are restricted, and you must find VHS tapes to use with the TV in the living room. That is not the most inviting place to revisit, honestly, but you do want to be strategic as well, because I died without saving once, and I had to start all over again, and I lost probably in the region of 20 minutes of progression. Fortunately, once you do get used to the controls, it's honestly relatively easy to outmaneuver the killer. I should note here as well that there is no fighting back, it is all about the chase. Now, when you do sprint, yes, they can hear you, Supposedly it alerts them quickly to your location, but I'd also note they're not the sharpest tool in the shed. All you basically need to do is reach a wardrobe to hide in it. After waiting a few moments then, you are going to be free to explore again. The puzzles on top of this then, I'd call them well crafted. While there's some back and forth involved, nothing becomes overly obscure, although I will admit the final puzzle definitely had me stumped for quite some time. So overall, I'd say I have very few complaints, to be honest. As is often the case with Puppet Combo, it's an acquired taste, but I believe it successfully achieves what it sets out to. I think it might not be the scariest experience from them, so you stay out the house for that in my opinion, but it's definitely the most fun I've had in a while. Normally I'm just kind of sitting here having a panic attack. It still did catch me off guard as well with a fair few jump scares, so don't underestimate it because I said that. I will also point out then it is relatively short. It took me a couple of hours and I was stuck at a few sections for a little while. Again though, there's 2 endings and then there's a second whole game. So the second game in question there is Night of the Scissors, which was the developer's initial effort, or at least it predates Cannibal Abduction. It's quite evident that it lacks the fine-tuning present in the latter release, and I can see why it didn't grab the title spot for this release, but it is still a fantastic bonus. It just doesn't have the same level of detail in the world, the puzzles are less frequent, and it's even shorter, clocking in at around 40 minutes. I still enjoyed it though, and it was definitely interesting to see, where the developer came from and what they went on to make. What's particularly interesting though is that it offers a third-person modern control scheme in this release that you can activate. I'm curious as to why this didn't carry over to Cannibal Abduction. Personally, I did still stick with the preset setup of static camera and tank controls because it felt more in line with the overall vibe of the experience, but I definitely found that interesting. Perhaps the larger open spaces lend themselves better to that control scheme. Visually speaking, I can't claim that it's a stunning looking game, but personally it has a certain charm to it. I believe the combination of retro-styled visuals and the VHS filter adds a great fusion of classic horror games and movies. The visual filter effect is particularly useful as well, and not only reflecting the era that influences the game, but it also becomes more pronounced when the killer is in close proximity. Also, the camera angles are well executed. While some remain static, many kind of rotate and shift with the character movement, creating that cinematic atmosphere, especially when it uses this dynamic to reveal the killer's presence. On that note, I like the character models too, and I particularly enjoyed the opening and closing cutscenes. However, visually, there was a couple of challenges. You'll want to play with the brightness of each game, make sure it's right for you. Cannibal was fine for me, but Scissors was too dark. Then in Cannibal Abduction, I experienced a glitch where the character briefly became static instead of moving. Now I do want to point out, to be very clear, this was just for a few seconds. Then I wasn't going to mention this, but the end credits, it's not going to impact the overall experience, but I noticed that some of the names do overlap with one another, and I believe those involved in the project will want to have their contributions recognized clearly. Alright, so finally, let's touch on the audio briefly. In Cannibal Abduction, there's voice acting in the opening and closing sequences. It's appropriately wooden, adding to the game's charm. As for the soundscapes, both games feature relatively minimal music, sometimes appearing almost quite still and calm. However, this tranquility is effectively disrupted by harsh sound effects that indicate the presence of the killer or hint at their proximity. These sound effects managed to catch me off guard more than a few times with well-executed jump scares. Overall, Cannibal Abduction is a winner in my book. While the game is on the shorter side, this is reflected in its price point of $11.99 USD or your regional equivalent. Plus it offers 2 endings to uncover and a bonus experience. I just think if you're a fan of this era of horror, there's no reason why you shouldn't give it a go. It doesn't bring anything groundbreaking to the genre, and it's not the scariest offering from Puppet Combo, but it's genuinely the most enjoyable experiences I've had with one of their titles in a good while. I will also note here though as well, I suspect that will be a rarity, as I'm sure their next release will head straight back to the regularly scheduled programming of basically scaring the crap out of me, making me want to walk away. Today though, Cannibal Abduction gets a great 8 out of 10 from me. I think it is well worth your time. So will you be checking this one out? Let us know in the comments with that. Hit subscribe, join us here for reviews, deals, news and lists daily, and I'll see you all on the next video. Thanks everyone.